The prophet Ezekiel was exiled with King Jehoiachin in 597 BC to Babylon, along with 10,000 others, including political and military leaders and skilled craftsmen. He was both a prophet and a priest of the house of Zadok. Ezekiel had been in Babylon 5 years when God called him. He was to teach the Torah to the exiles in Babylon. However, the people refused to acknowledge that they had been exiled because of their own rebellion against God. They remembered that God had promised them certain things. The Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary says, He had entered into an eternal covenant with Israel from which there would be no divorce. He had given them the land of Canaan as an eternal possession. He had established the Davidic kingship, promising them eternal title to the throne of Israel. He had chosen Zion as his eternal dwelling place. When the people were in Jerusalem, they counted on God to keep these covenants with them. They thought they were safe. They thought they were secure. They failed to remember that God had said, "If you will obey my laws and commandments, I will be your God, and you will be my people." These covenants were conditional upon their actions. Along with the covenant blessings were covenant warnings if they persisted in rebellion. As a prophet, Ezekiel was to be a watchman to warn Israel of their wickedness. God told him, "When I say to the wicked, 'You shall surely die,' and you don't warn the wicked from his wicked way to save his life, then that man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at your hand. But if you warn the wicked, and he doesn't turn from his wicked way, then he shall die in his iniquity, but you have delivered your soul. You won't be held responsible." In 587 BC, when Jerusalem had been destroyed as Ezekiel had prophesied, the people began to take him seriously. Since Ezekiel had been exiled in 597 BC, and he was called about 5 years after that, he had been prophesying for about 5 years when Jerusalem was destroyed. He then prophesied messages of hope that God would restore Israel to full status and it would be eternal. But Ezekiel's questions had been, why did God allow the temple and Jerusalem to be destroyed? Why did God allow the people of Israel to be carried away into exile? What future is there for Israel? The prophets, since the time of Isaiah, had been prophesying destruction if the people would not return to God. They believed what they wanted to believe. The people were carried away from their homeland because they had failed to let the land rest. There was a sabbatical year commandment that the people were to let the land rest every 7th year. For 490 years, the people failed to let the land rest, so God took them away for 70 Sabbath years, which they had failed to observe, to let the land rest. Much of what Ezekiel prophesied would come to pass in the latter days. Ezekiel's preaching didn't do much to bring a change in the people's ways or attitudes, but they were totally weaned off of idolatry. Also, Ezekiel was vindicated when the disaster he prophesied about Jerusalem came to pass. God told him the people would recognize that there had been a true prophet among them. Ezekiel had several visions. He saw visions of God and the heavenly throne chariot. That's hard for us to picture, but Holman says, virtually every feature of the heavenly throne chariot has been attested on images and reliefs from the ancient world. Ezekiel saw God's departure from the temple. He saw the valley of dry bones. This reveals the national resurrection of Israel, which came to pass on May 14, 1948, when Israel was recognized as a nation after almost 1900 years. He saw the new temple of the millennium and all of the land which would be Israel's at that time. In his temple vision, God took Ezekiel into the temple and guided him throughout the building in chapters 40 through 43. There is much that Ezekiel saw in visions that John also saw and wrote in the book of Revelation. Many of Ezekiel's prophecies have been fulfilled, but there are still many yet to be fulfilled.